Has this weeping stone brought misery and misfortune to the owners of this Scottish castle? Can this American baseball team blame 50 years of defeats on the malevolent influence of the goat they banned from the ballpark? When archaeologists descended to the sacred tomb of Tutankhamun, did they unleash the curse of the Pharaohs? Mysteries from the files of Arthur C. Clarke, author of 2001 and inventor of the communications satellite. Now in retreat in Sri Lanka, he ponders the riddles of this and other worlds.
Elephants are now protected here in Sri Lanka, but that wasn't always the case. In the 19th century, they were hunted almost to extinction. The greatest bag of all was claimed by a colonial surveyor, Major Thomas Rogers. He boasted that he'd shot more than 1,300 before losing count. One day in 1845, an old Buddhist priest, sickened by the slaughter, pronounced this curse: "White Sahib, thine hour is drawing near. Thou shalt be consumed by the lightning of heaven before thou canst raise thine accursed weapon again." Terrified, the major gave up hunting, but he couldn't contain his bloodlust for long. On the way to shoot one more elephant, he was struck by lightning and killed instantly. The priest's curse was even said to have blighted the major's tomb. Over the years, it was the only one in the cemetery repeatedly struck by lightning. But do curses placed on buildings and things really work? Do they have the power to harm and even to kill?
Generations of owners of Fyvie Castle in Scotland believe that they do. In the 13th century, they lived in fear of a prophet of doom called Tamas the Rhymer. He travelled the country casting curses on houses and families. For a year before his arrival, Fyvie's gates were left open in a misplaced gesture of welcome.
He arrived on the lawns outside the castle, and as soon as he got there, a tremendous storm blew up. The trees began to sort of bend, the boughs creaked, twigs snapped, but Tamas was in the very centre of the storm, and not one breath of wind caught his hair or a whisker of his beard was moved. And then as the wind was howling round the turrets of Fyvie, the great gate went slam in his face. And so angry was he by this ill reception that he placed the curse on the house.
To lift his curse, Thomas decreed that 3 stones must be collected together and thrown off the property. One lay under water, and the other 2 in the castle itself. The stones were said to weep, but only one has ever been found and is carefully preserved in a bowl.
The curse is, in a sense, unbreakable, and Thomas himself said of the 3 stones, one is in the oldest tower, unidentified, one is in my lady's bower, which used to be in the 18th century and the 17th century, the room above here, and then for the last 100 years or more, the stone has actually resided in this room, the charter room, and here it is next to me. And the 3rd stone is in the bottom of the River Itham, which is a boulder-strewn riverbed. And as Thomas says, it is impossible to get. We can't find it. So they can never be brought together and thrown off the property. And the interpretation is difficult, and the popular belief is that the eldest son of the family will not inherit. The Forbes-Leith family, who owned this house, it's curious that within their ownership of the house, every single generation has been affected by this. Lord Leith, he had 2 children, a son and a daughter, and the son died of enteric fever in the Boer War in 1900, so that the daughter inherited. She had 2 sons, and the eldest one, Arthur Forbes-Leith, was claimed in 1914 in the First War, so that the second son inherited. And that second son, Sir Ian, had 2 sons, of which the eldest died in the Malayan campaign in 1949. The owner of Fyvie is the one who is supposed to be under this curse. But the house is no longer owned by a single life. It's in fact owned by the National Trust for Scotland, and therefore there is no elder son or any such thing. So one wonders whether this has finally, in fact, turned the tables on Tamas himself.
At Wrigley Field baseball ground, the home team, the Chicago Cubs, has no such luck. In fact, they've no luck at all. For 50 years, they've suffered the effects of a curse imposed by a disgruntled fan. The Cubs have consistently failed to get to the final of the World Series. In Major League Baseball, there's no worse fate.
The curse began in 1945 during the World Series between the Cubs and the Detroit Tigers. William Billy Goat Cianis, a tavern owner in Chicago, had a mascot goat, and he bought tickets for both himself and the goat to attend the World Series. Once he got to the ballpark, the ushers would not let in this so-called smelly goat and offend the sensibilities of the well-heeled fans. So William Billy Goat Cianis put a curse on the Cubs that they would not win until they let his goat in. The Cubs then ended up losing the World Series to the Detroit Tigers and have not been back to the World Series ever since.
Every time the Cubs get close, something goes wrong. A pitcher gives up a home run for the wrong batter. A fielder makes an error. Once, the entire pitching staff got injured at the same time.
Well, every time a player come on the field, he want to give his best. He want to give 100%. But I think deep down within their mind, they know that not winning a World Series, not playing good baseball here at times, it's because of the GOAT.
Well, the odds on a team like the Cubs somehow avoiding a World Series for the better part of 50 years are just astronomical. No Las Vegas odds maker would post them. I did talk to one of the top odds makers in Las Vegas 2 years ago, and he said the odds are 1,000,000 to 1. 1,000,000 to 1, unbelievable. Something should have happened during that period of time to have allowed the Cubs to get a lucky break and get into a World Series.
Whenever things get desperate, the Cubs invite a goat to Wrigley Field. The first year they tried it, they won the division. When they lost 13 home games in a row, the goat was persuaded back. The team won that day, but it didn't last.
If we're about 10 games from winning the division, we're going to bring the GOAT out because we don't like to think about if the GOAT's not here, we won't win the World Series. So if we that close, we're going to make sure, because everybody know that we can't win a World Series unless we let the GOAT in the ballpark. We're going to have that GOAT right here eating the grass out here in Wrigley Field.
The Cubs' loyal fans like to drown their sorrows whenever they lose a game. It was from this bar that William Billy Goat Cianis set out for Wrigley Field on that fateful day in 1945. The rejected goat's baleful eye keeps a watch on proceedings.
Like Chicago Cubs, you couldn't buy worse luck. Ever since the curse in 1945, they haven't had a decent team. In fact, I could pitch better than some of the people they put on the team right now.
They're never going to list the curse because the GOAT is dead. There's only one GOAT, and they blew it.
I'll support them forever, but it's kind of like cheering for a horse with a bad leg right now.
There is no more glorious landscape in northern England than these rolling acres. Yet the Bagot family of Levens Hall lived for generations under a shadow cast by an unthinking act of cruelty against a needy visitor.
A lady who was destitute came to the front door of the house and she begged for food, and she was told that people at the first station should go round to the back door where she would be fed. She went and did as instructed, and she went down the back drive round towards the back door and expired on the back drive of hunger. And she said, in her dying breath presumably, that the house would never have a male heir, not until a white fawn was born in the park, and we have black fallow deer, so that's unusual, and also that the River Kent at the bottom of the garden would freeze. And neither of those things happened, for 200 years.
The house and lands passed down the female line. The ladies of Levens were not empowered to improve the estate, so it languished in limbo. Amazing coincidences finally broke the curse.
The family have always kept scrapbooks from a long way back. The cuttings are here, which go on about the Great Frost, which happened in 1895, and there are photographs of the gardens under snow.
Records confirm this was the coldest year for half a century. Locals were able to skate on Lake Windermere. For the Baggots, the Great Freeze brought a miracle. The River Kent froze over. That same year, the herd of black fallow deer in the park produced a single white fawn. The proof is glued firmly into the pages of the Baggot scrapbook.
They were so excited that, in fact, they shot it. It says, "The woods of Levens hail the white fawn's birth, herald and symbol of the gift of God."
The gift of God duly appeared, in the shape of the longed-for son and heir.
Alan Desmond Baggot was born in that year, and his picture eventually features in this scrapbook with his mother and a little dog, and there it is.
Ancient Egyptians used curses to protect their departed loved ones. As a matter of course, tombs were inscribed with dire warnings. The oldest curse of all is being cleaned.
We can see the first curse inscription ever occurred. And it's occurred by someone who was a draftsman, someone who did the technical work. And if we look here, now we can see the whole inscription. The man is saying here, listen, all of you. I never did think anything wrong in my life. Everything I do is perfect. This is why the gods likes me. If anyone will disturb my tomb, what's going to happen to him? The crocodile, the hippopotamus, and the lion will eat you. But on the other side, his wife left the same inscription exactly. But she added here more, and she said, the snake and the scorpion will eat you.
The curse of Tutankhamun is the most famous of all. It was said to have caused a whole spate of sudden and inexplicable deaths after the young king's tomb was discovered in the 1920s.
He was once a very popular king and beloved of his subjects.
At this theme park near Cairo, tourists can do ancient Egypt in one day. The high spot is a visit to a replica of King Tutankhamun's tomb. It's laid out just like the real one on the day it was opened.
And here we have the great sarcophagus of Tutankhamun, the splendor that was 3,500 years ago. One of the things that is a legend about the tomb of Tutankhamun is the fact that it was said that whoever went into the tomb or touched this tomb would die. And there was nothing that was found in the tomb that would say that, but that was the legend.
King Tutankhamun's tomb was found in 1922 by archaeologist Howard Carter. He told his sponsor in England, Lord Carnarvon, of his wonderful discovery. Carnarvon rushed to Egypt at once to examine the treasure. But warning voices sounded. Arthur Weigel, who was covering the story for the Daily Mail, told Carnarvon he would be dead within 6 weeks. Just over 6 weeks later, Carnarvon was indeed dead. He had long suffered from ill health, but the cursed story took a firm hold. The family seat of Highclere is now lived in by his grandson.
My grandfather died in Cairo as a result of cutting himself with the razor. The wound became infected. He got septicemia and, alas, died about 3 o'clock in the morning. All the lights in Cairo went out, which was a strange phenomenon, because when my father went next morning to see Lord Allenby apologized for all the lights going out in Cairo, and he'd asked the chief royal engineer to investigate it, but they never got to the bottom of that problem. So that was one of the things.
And then at the same time as my grandfather died in Cairo, allowing for the time difference, his Jack Russell Terrier gave a short growl and died in the housekeeper's room in this house.
Lord Carnarvon was not the only one said to have been killed by the curse. American railroad tycoon Jay Gould died of pneumonia shortly after visiting the tomb, and only months after seeing the find, this Egyptian prince was shot dead by his wife. But the most likely candidates were unscathed. Howard Carter was first into the tomb and lived to 64. Of the other experts who even ate lunch in Pharaohs' tombs, only one died young of natural causes.
So much for King Tut. In fact, a recent study suggests that the people who visited the tomb actually had a greater life expectancy than normal. I hope that's true, because I've been there myself. However, scientists have discovered that some tombs do indeed harbor a threat to life, which has nothing to do with paranormal powers.
Dr. Nasri Iskander is curator of mummies at the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. Studying methods to preserve them has given him unique insights into the legendary curses.
I myself, when I enter any tomb, I prefer to wait for some time outside the tomb after just opening the door slowly. And then I prefer to check with small instruments the percentage of oxygen inside the tomb before I enter and work in it, and to monitor all the time during our working in it, and to be all the time on the safe readings. This is very important. This mummy is 4,500 years old, and this is the oldest mummy in our Egyptian history now, and it's well preserved. You can see here the features of the face in a very good condition, and also all of his organs. During the years of closing, there is always a reduction of the percentage of oxygen in it, and this is also responsible of stopping or reducing the activation of these microbes and bacteria and viruses. Then when you just open it for the first time, then will enter first? They are going to breathe all of the air without oxygen, but with the microbes and bacteria and viruses. These viruses will start to activate directly and immediately in the lungs of the first one enter the tombs.
The picture postcard English village of Tichborne kept a curse at bay for 600 years. But one slip-up cost the lords of the manor their original mansion and also their family name. The curse has blighted the Tichborne family because one of their ancestors was cruel to his dying wife.
This is the field around which Mabella Tichborne, my ancestor, crawled just before she died in about 1188, when her husband refused her dying request to give out bread to the poor of the parish, which was a long time ago, so they were quite poor in those days. And he said that he would give the produce off as much land as she could crawl round while a burning torch still glowed in her hand. So she got up off her deathbed and crawled round this, I think, 23 acres. And then, I suppose, the torch went out and she died. She said that she wished the bread off the land to be given to the people every year in her memory on Lady Day, the 25th of March, the day she died. And that this must go on if there was ever a break and the Tichbornes stopped giving out this bread. She laid a curse on the family. She said that there would be a generation of 7 sons, followed by 7 daughters, the house would fall down and the name would die out.
In 1794, one reckless Tichborne stopped the dole for a year. Since then, his descendants have done their best to repair the damage by faithfully performing the ceremony. During the Second World War, anonymous friends kept the dole going by donating their flower coupons. The head of the family was so relieved that he wrote to the Times to thank them, but it was all to no avail.
I think you do have to believe in the curse in the face of the evidence that's been presented even over all these years. The house did fall down, there were 7 sons, there were 7 daughters, and there are now no heirs.
In New England, the dark deeds ascribed to the witches of Salem are now history. But behind the town's cheerful facade, an ancient evil may still weave a sinister spell. This man believes it nearly cost him his life.
Here lies the remains of George Corwin, Esquire, born in England, AD 1610, died in Salem, AD 1665. Other descendants of the Corwin family are buried here, including George Corwin Jr., who was the old sheriff of Essex County during witch times, the fellow that caused me all my problems here in Salem as well, many years later.
Rob Cahill was proud to be elected Sheriff of Essex County. He headed a team of dedicated lawmen until he was forced from office by a mysterious disease.
While I was in the hospital, I had a long time to think, and I, of course, thought about where on earth could this terrible disease have come from, why me? Even the doctors didn't know what it was, and so I did think of certainly a curse, and a curse that could very well have gone back to the original curse of Sheriff George Corwin.
During the trials in 1692, many innocent people were done to death. One victim was Giles Corey. For defending his wife from the witch hunt, he himself was accused. Sheriff Corwin personally imposed the cruelest punishment. Corey was pressed to death beneath enormous rocks.
At one point, his tongue came out of his mouth, and the cruel sheriff of Essex County, George Corwin, took his cane and poked the tongue back in again. And these are from eyewitnesses who were at the scene. Finally, as he was dying under the pressure of the rocks, Giles Corey spit out a curse. And he cursed the sheriff himself. And he said, "I curse Salem, and I curse you, Sheriff Corwin." And he died.
Sheriff Corwin got his just deserts. Shortly after the curse was laid, he died an early death. The disease that killed him has plagued his successors ever since.
The sheriff before me really died of a blood disease. The sheriff before him, his father, died of a heart attack in office. The sheriff before him died of a heart attack, not in office, but shortly thereafter. There's something to the curse, and nobody knows that any better than I do. I survived, which I think is terrific, but I went through a lot of hell and still do. When I was at death's door, one of the valves in my heart is replaced every 10 years with a pig's valve. The present sheriff, he looks kind of askance at me. We joke about the curse sometimes, but it was very real to me.
Rob's wife Sandy is glad that his time as Sheriff of Essex County is now over.
I strongly believe in the curse. I've seen it happen. I don't want it to happen again. If one of my family were to even think about running for the office of Sheriff of Essex County, I would do everything in my power to convince them not to run. Even a friend of mine, especially family members. I believe that strongly in the curse.
I'm usually not very superstitious, but I've gone through a lot of hell and a lot of sickness. And there's no explanation to this sickness. I would not want to see any member of my family or any good friend of mine go through what I went through. And I would just say, no, don't run. Stay away from it.
Much as I enjoy these spooky tales, they don't really bear serious investigation. Proclaiming that there's a curse on a tomb to keep robbers away might seem a good idea, though it certainly didn't work for most of the pharaohs. I suspect that coincidence and imaginative revision of the facts by later storytellers accounts for the other cases. But if you ever do find yourself in a place with a curse on it, don't hang around.